Need a search engine optimization SEO services? Then get in touch with our professional and friendly team to learn more about our range of custom and tailored services designed to suit your exact needs. Every one of our professionals have acquired years of experience, which ensures you get the very best. Our experienced staff is waiting to hear from you and to answer any specific questions that you may have on how we can meet your needs. Just ask for a consultation and let us prove our commitment to you as we promise to maintain the highest level of quality and commitment. Your satisfaction is our prime concern. So please, don't hesitate to get in contact with us and let us show you all the great options we have.
And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course our legacy site at coalitionradio.us. Well, our next guest tonight is, as they say on the Borscht Belt, no stranger to us. Here at the Coalition, he officially qualifies for repeat offender status, but this, I believe, is the first time he's appearing with us at our new home at coalitionradionetwork.com. By day, he is a communication manager for a think tank operating in the Liberty space. He also is an associate professor of communications at Lehigh University, having accomplished the seemingly impossible, which is to have a degree from Lehigh and Lafayette College. He is, of course, Connor Dragotis of ConnorDragotis.com. Welcome back to the Coalition, and what do you think of our new digs?
It's fantastic. I'm thrilled to be a frequent offender here, and just another beautiful day in quarantine.
Well, there you go. We're the organization that decided about 2 weeks before the plague hit that it would be a great idea to expand right into the economic abyss. But hey, it's been a lot of fun in our first couple months. It's chaos reigns supreme out there, but within chaos, of course, there is opportunity. And in the last month or two, we've finally started to see that, what do they call it, the sprouts, the green sprouts, if you will, of political thought and movement. We are going to have a presidential election this year, regardless of what certain vested interests might believe, regardless of whether or not we have to mail the ballots in or we have to spend, what is it? It's black if it's white if there's a new pope. It's black if the Cardinals had to vote again. Something like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. As long as there's no hanging chads involved, I feel like I'll be happy.
There you go. Where is good old Al Gore when you need him? Let's kind of get back to basics here. You know, in the past, for folks who are just joining us for the first time and might see this for the first time, what Connor and I try to do in a finite period of time is to, if you will, dissect the undissectable, which is, of course, how candidates, how businesses in times of crisis or in terms of candidacies deliver their message. You know, what are they doing to break through to, as I said, deliver the message, but at the same time control the narrative and promote an image, if you will, that they believe will accomplish victory. And while that may seem straightforward, it is certainly not in an age of communications where multiple platforms occur in a variety of spaces, and whereas viewing habits, and how they digest information is profoundly changed even within the last 90 days. And at the same time, how interviewers can be polled has profoundly changed over the last few months. In a nutshell, the entire media world has been turned completely upside down. Did you ever expect to see anything like this?
Honestly, it's been a whole new world. Like most people, I've been working from home. I've been in my home office since the beginning of February. So, trying to find ways to creatively apply communications to the world is a challenge. And it gets to be an especially unique challenge in politics during a campaign season, right? We have one president who refuses to wear a mask. We have a presidential candidate who really hasn't left his basement in months. And then we have the Libertarian Party, which is really digging in a whole new direction here. And really, you got three different approaches to examine, dissect, and I guess we'll see who wins out when it comes to November.
Interestingly enough, there is a philosophy out there that feels that the change of the dynamics, the absence, if you will, now of the big rallies and the candidates flying in on the tarmac and making the big speeches as they greet the apparatchiks of their individual party, the changing viewing habits as they've gone away from network television into binge watching, and/or perhaps astonishingly enough, a movement away from Americans from the screen just because of exhaustion with it, and dare I say, going outside and embracing the real world in each other. I mean, it's all of that and more, but the feeling is that the Libertarian Party now, and to a certain degree the Green Party, have been placed on an equal footing because we've all got to use the same digital approach, the same, well, what you see here right now, two guys with headsets on, one in a 19th century mill building, the other in a beautiful home somewhere in Pennsylvania. But ultimately, all of a sudden, our campaign approaches don't look a lot different than the Republicrats. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. When I found out, as we were discussing what we wanted to cover tonight, and we were talking about the different approaches in this area of technology, I decided to run a little experiment. So yesterday, I went on to the Libertarian candidate, Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen ticket, and I signed up for email alerts. And then I did the exact same thing on Donald Trump's website and Joe Biden's website, just to see, hey, what does it actually look like to enter these campaigns as a potentially interested person, voter, in 2020? And here's the way this went. I had emails in my inbox from Joe Biden within 3 minutes. I had an email from Donald Trump within 10 minutes. And unfortunately, I have yet to hear from the Libertarian Party candidate. And I think that's really going to be the biggest difference maker, is what is the public perception of these different candidates from the first time that they're introduced to who these people are. For better or worse, Donald Trump is a known entity. Joe Biden, for his 50 years in office, in one form or another, is a known entity. And the Libertarian Party really would be well served by remembering a very important key message in marketing, which is to always remember who the audience is. Right now, I'd argue that the Libertarian vote is secure in terms of card-carrying party members. So the appeal has to be to the rest of America, where people are looking for candidates who are viable, stable, principled, and professional. And I want to see those third-party candidates generally, but especially in the LP, where liberty is number one, put those qualities forward from day one. And that's going to have to start with building systems that work in the digital age.
No, absolutely. You know, it was interesting to watch these same campaigns during the primary process, if you will, if you want to call that in the libertarian movement. In the liberty movement, if you will, there are about 45 or so state conventions that take place, and libertarian candidates traverse the nation going to each one. What's different from the Libertarian Party in their nomination process is that you cannot, under our bylaws, quote unquote, accrue delegates to a candidate. There is no commitment per se. And as we found out during the very first digital political convention that took place, there is no commitment to any one particular candidate. It was a multi-day, multi-ballot process in order to nominate the president or the vice president. What was fascinating to see was the digital commitment, I'll call it, by each candidate. Clearly, the Hornberger campaign was top-notch in their approach. They employed email as well as videos as well as text messaging. Spike Cohen, who we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, used a remarkable set of imagery to accomplish his goal, which was to put him out there as a consensus choice of both Mises, radical, and occasionally a begrudging, pragmatic libertarian. Other candidates just didn't seem that interested. Did the other ones pay the price for that?
Absolutely. Anytime you're not going to meet people on the turf that they want to be met on, it's just not going to work. People like to be approached in areas where they're most comfortable. That means really having a good understanding of the research, right? So, we've seen huge numbers of emails coming out of the Liberty movement over the past couple months advocating for one or the other. And I really do think that it kind of won out, not necessarily just in the frequency of communication, but really around the quality of communication that was delivered to the audience it was intending to reach, which is Libertarian Party delegates. It did its job, and the people who did the best job easily, seemed to come up with the best. Obviously, the one who did it best for the short time that he was in the race was Justin Amash, but because he had a very professional team digging in. I also signed up for his email list when that came out, and that was when I got an email within 10 minutes asking me to donate and to take other actions. But taking those steps, absolutely, Joe and Spike did what they need to do. Really, at this point, it's a matter of how they're going to pivot from a limited libertarian delegate audience to, the 25% of America that's evangelical Christian or different minorities. How are they going to reach these different segments, and how are they going to get creative in order to run a successful campaign?
Exactly. So what do they have to do? What, you talked about professionalism. Now, clearly, it's a little bit more of a challenge to be professional when you're crazy Uncle Joe Biden, and you've been cooped up in the same I don't know, broom closet seemingly for the last 90 days. But what are some of the hallmarks do you think that people have to see?
Yeah, I think I've said this to you before, but I'm an optimistic guy, right? I'm hopeful that Liberty can win in 2020, despite everything being stacked against them. 2020 is a time, as you just alluded to, where we have two of the worst candidates perhaps ever for two major parties. And I didn't think I'd be able to say that after the dismal 2016 showing. But the LP absolutely stands to make serious gains if they run a serious campaign. The first step that I would take is bringing in professionals who are already integrated into the political systems and technological systems necessary to run a professional campaign. That means owning data. That means running a comprehensive email and digital social media outreach. And most importantly, as you said earlier as well, those are the areas where libertarians and any smaller non-major party candidate can make a big difference this election cycle, because Joe Biden isn't going to be out greeting crowds and doing the selfie lines like Elizabeth Warren. We're not going to see Donald Trump shaking nearly as many hands or getting out there to run the type of campaign he ran last time. He is out there doing some rallies. But if the campaign is going to be digital, I don't think that Spike or Joe are necessarily themselves digital marketing experts. And I'd say you need to bring in a professional firm that can run this from the ground up from day one and make it a reality.
Now, let's talk about the difference between a professional digital marketing firm and someone who's really, really, really good at social media, because those are, it's a critical distinction, and those are two very different skill sets, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think what I'd want to say there too is, the social media gurus are amazing because they relate to people in small audiences, and that's a really important component. What you'd be looking at with a firm, however, is the ability to automate systems. Like I was talking about with the emails, there's no reason that I should not have gotten an email from the Libertarian Ticket within a few minutes of signing up for their email list. Those enterprise systems and then drip campaigns, right? So systems that once you get the first email, depending on whether I open it, whether I click on it, what I click on, it would kick me into a series of automated emails over the next perhaps 6 weeks or 6 months that is designed to get me to take specific actions, donate, engage, spread the word. Bringing in a real firm would help set up those systems and automate it to allow the candidates to do what they do best, which is Go out there and interact with people. Even if it's digitally, they could be spending more time in town halls and less time worrying about corralling potentially a couple hundred or a couple thousand volunteers going in their various different directions across the internet.
But it's as critical as the content, it's as critical as the reaction to that content that you collect in the form of a professional digital marketing approach, isn't it? Because ultimately, what you're not really, and let me phrase this properly. While as important as that first contact may seem, it's more about collecting information about that individual that's you're in that first contact that's important than the actual content of that first contact, isn't it? Because that's what sets the stage for other contacts. Did I get that right?
I think you did, right? I mean, I'd refer to it as the snowball effect, right? You're going to start with something that is perhaps very, very small, but over the course of time, that could become an avalanche. It's one of the things that the two major parties do incredibly well. And I think the left, up until Donald Trump, did this much better than the right. The right is, I'd say, caught up at this point. Donald Trump really revolutionized the game, and Brad Parscale, his campaign manager, is a digital guy. And he's brought them into this new era, certainly. But what you have to think about there is that those few emails, it's not like Donald Trump started with 0 email contacts for the 2020 cycle, right? Unfortunately, the Libertarian Party is starting pretty much with libertarian lists. They need to build that avalanche, starting with a small snowball, and do that over consecutive cycles. The era of candidates starting from nothing needs to come to an end real quick. If these arguably great candidates that keep coming out here, if they're going to be successful, they need those tools in the tool belt, and that's going to take some institutional change at the LP.
Develop that. What do you mean by institutional change?
One of the things that I've seen with the LP is a lot of broadcasted infighting, right? Maybe that's even an understatement. People who are arguing about the wrong things. And also, I think inherent to a decentralized movement, in that the LP wants to empower, in large part, state organizations and even local organizations to really own their areas, is that if you don't have a free transfer of information up and down that chain, unfortunately, data gets lost. And when you have how many counties in each of these 50 United States, you can't count on having really effective automated systems developed for every single one of those thousands and thousands of counties. What you need is to have a system that empowers local organizations, but gives them the infrastructure to succeed. I've seen some amazing things starting to happen at the LP with the creation of technology that allows, for example, for a national CRM that local leaders can tap into. But it would be foolish for leaders at the LP to not recognize that, hey, people who care about liberty are already behind the 8 ball. Let's get out there and focus on what's important. And that's giving them those tools, even if they're centralized, to access them on a decentralized way.
Interesting. What type of resources does that take? Is that an inordinately expensive project? Obviously,
I really
parties with countless millions.
Right. Yeah, there's certainly no shortage of money in the Democrat and Republican war chest. On either side, it's massive spending. But what I normally look for is an enterprise solution that allows for scalability. So you're only charged based on the number of data points that you're putting into the system. So a lot of times what you'll see with any CRM or client relationship manager, where you would manage an email system like this, is you'd want something that says, hey, listen, if you only have 1,000 names in here, it's going to be $10 a month. If you have 5 million, we're going to start charging you a heck of a lot more. Building systems that can grow with the liberty movement are going to be key. So money is an issue without a doubt. And if someone listening to this has the means to support liberty candidates and liberty infrastructure, please get in touch with me, get in touch with someone local, get in touch with the LP National, and see what you can do to help support these efforts. But along the way, building and scaling is going to be just as important. And hopefully, if the systems are designed correctly, the money will follow good digital design.
Right. So how much of that focus needs to be spent on breaking down the appeal of individual issues by individual prospective voter?
Well, I always would recommend that you're talking to people about the stuff that they actually care about, right? If someone is very passionate about criminal justice reform, maybe you don't hit them with the Second Amendment appeals on day one, right? So there's a whole other data set using consumer data or using political data as well. You can purchase this stuff just as Joe Schmo on the street, going to a company like Voter Gravity or i360. You could just purchase these data sets for your local county with a voter file and actually use that as a jumping off point. So I think you're hitting the nail on the head, is that if you're talking to people about the things that they care about and you're staying away from the issues that maybe they're not ready to talk about, that's the foot in the door that many times you actually need to build a real relationship, start shaking hands, kissing babies, and really show the good that liberty can bring to communities.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, we've got a rather interesting mix of candidates at the national level. Jo Jorgensen is well known as a libertarian's libertarian. Folks would technically sense that she is much more of a pragmatic approach to the libertarian movement. And then you've got Spike Cohen, who I count as a friend, full disclosure, who I admire a lot. What, you've seen some of the videos. We played them here of Spike Cohen. Really some astonishing images of really focusing, if you will, on almost a dystopian American approach to the duopoly as they grind our civil liberties into oblivion. Is how effective, now that's been very effective, I should say, for Spike within the libertarian movement, because he, while not known to many 6 months ago, through a combination of, feet on the street and a lot of phone calls and a lot of work, became the winner, if you will, in the Spike Vermin Supreme arrangement. And how much of that do you think was the imagery that he surrounded his campaign by?
I think that as you look at Spike, he is the type of person who has done very, very well speaking to the audience in the LP. I should say as well, I like Spike. I like his messages, but I do have some concerns about his approach following his nomination for the vice presidential slot. Spike, if Spike is watching this or listening to this, when I heard that you wanted to talk about his prospects in particular, I did take some time to put together 3 easy recommendations that I think could make a really big difference. If that would be a good time for me to throw those in here.
Absolutely.
Number 1, keep your clothes on. I think that it's hysterical. I think that it has worked with the LP delegation, but you know who doesn't like it? My grandmother. And she's much more likely to donate money and has the means to do so, but also most of America is not ready to see a political candidate on a national scale take that approach. Mm-hmm. The second is I cannot tell you how far a $20 video backdrop from Amazon would go. Whether you like it or not, a political candidate is playing a part, and sometimes that requires a costume. I'm fascinated by the patterns on the sofa in the living room that he does a lot of his recording, but I don't think it's adding to his credibility. And at the end of the day, when we were talking earlier, viability, stability, principled, and professional. If we're looking at those things, sometimes playing the part is what's going to make a difference. And especially when you look at the psychology behind how fast people form their initial perceptions of anyone, let alone a political candidate, you have to put that foot forward from the very first moment. And the final bit that I'd have, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, there's an expectation from Americans, and it's interesting. I'm always fascinated when a constituency, a individual group of people, when they are presented with a manufactured, polished image, they're made well aware that it's a manufactured, polished image, yet embrace the manufactured, polished image, despite the fact that they know full well that it's been created simply for an illusory purposes for that moment. It's, we're it's almost like in wrestling. All right, we're going to do the pile driver now. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, and go. And we're shocked when he does the pile, we cheer. Right? Is that subject to change, or is that model just locked into place? We're told we need to see something.
No, it is absolutely subject to change.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and you're hitting on something that's very, very important. But again, what I always return to is regardless of whether or not the candidate is that person, at some point the candidate is just a vehicle, and the job of a candidate is to meet people on their terms, to do what is expected to get across the more important part, which is the ideas. And that's really my third part is Spike and Joe have real policy and real ideas that could fundamentally change America for the better. Let's not focus on free ponies. It's not about being in on the joke. It's just about making sure that your campaign isn't the punchline when the votes are counted in November. And if that means meeting people in a way that feels a little stilted and stifled, and as you said, prepared, we're fighting a bigger battle here. And it's against two very large organizations that have shown time and time again that they're going to put themselves first ahead of the rights of the American people. And the American people deserve more. They deserve to hear these ideas. And if we need to fake it a little bit to get there, I think that's a fight that's worth having.
Right. I mean, if you look at the crisis du jour this week in terms of the election, of course, was this artificial photo op in front of an Episcopalian church, and the message that just was ripped. I mean, the message the Republican Party was trying to present, that we are the party of stability, that we support religion, that we are the Bible. A man's got to, if I can quote a famous philosopher from the movies, a man's got to know his limitations. So the ability to contain one's giggling the minute one sees Donald Trump of, hookers, guns, and blow, is difficult to think that campaign professionals would have thought that somehow that was a great idea. A friend of mine in the car business always talks about there was a short-lived, ill-fated vehicle called the Aveo by General Motors, and he always pointed out that he wasn't so astonished by how bad the car was built or poorly it was constructed and designed. He wasn't so upset about the notion that it was so terribly marketed. It was this tiny car that was marketed to tall people, incredibly enough. What he was always astonished by was that 10 professionals from the General Motors Corporation sat down and actually thought this car was a good idea. So, when you look at the Republican messaging, who thought that bringing a president known for screwing around, thought it was a good idea to show up with a Bible that clearly he was uncomfortable holding? He had no idea about. I mean, come on, really? So what was that? The worst message you've ever seen in the midst of a political campaign and in the midst of a series of tragedies?
I think it was poorly thought out because it did alienate a huge number of people. What I will say, though, on the other side of that is if it hadn't had the necessity of clearing out protesters with smoke or tear gas, depending on who you ask, around it, I'm not sure it would have been as big of a deal. And the only reason I say that is I looked at it and I said, this is crazy, but I wasn't the audience. I'm part of a number of groups because I was a regional fellow with the National Review Institute. And that's plugged me in with a number of people who are run in very conservative circles who I otherwise may not have come across. And a lot of them actually found it to be powerful. And they said, thankfully, this is what I wanted to see. Donald Trump, in my mind, he broke the cardinal rule of the internet, which is never under any circumstances stand in front of a sign with letters that can be replaced on Photoshop, because you're going to get made fun of. But the people who perhaps were in his core base felt a little reassured during a time of strife that the commander in chief was out there holding a Bible instead of anything else. So maybe I just wasn't the audience for it, but by and large, the American people mostly appear to have not been the audience for that message.
But to your original point about bringing on a professional marketing firm, this to me is why no one should ever run their own campaigns at any level, whether it's political or marketing or advertising. Because I can just remember years and years ago, I was in the computer business, and I had the opportunity to use some co-op money, as they say, to do a television commercial. And the commercial I made, quite frankly, I wish I still had it so I could show it to you, to show just how incredibly awful it was, as is most owner-generated advertising. So is that testimony, is that living proof to the notion that, hand this job to a professional?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I feel a little biased here. My father is in the auto advertising business. And that's a fascinating world to grow up in and see. But if there's one lesson I learned through all of that, is that it's okay to ask for help from experts. And the liberty movement generally, because we tell people about the amazing aspects of being an individual and being able to create amazing things through your own force of will, is that it does sometimes make people less likely to ask for help when they need it the most. Voluntary association is a wonderful thing, and there are a lot of people out there. All of you candidates listening, there's a lot of people out there who can help you focus on the things that you do best and cover your blind spots and make you that much better.
Interesting. So the message is it's time for Liberty candidates to sit down and I wonder, by the way, and let me just jump into this. If I wonder if that shallow pool that was so aptly represented in the Robert Redford film, where he was the candidate, where he at the very beginning, and the movie seems almost quaint in reflection. If you could see it on Netflix, it's certainly worth a view. But this is really was filmed at the beginning, if you will, of the consulted candidate. Post 1972, post Tricky Dick. Began the rise of the consulted candidate, who words were interpreted, color of clothing, the style of one's hair, all of that became the currency du jour. Do you think libertarian candidates are just afraid to be quote unquote shallow like the duopoly? Is it that simple?
Having never run for office myself, I think it's hard to get a feel for what's going through someone's head when they decide to, take that on and really put themselves in the public eye. But I think that you are right to assume that there's some degree of fear, both to look like a fool in the public eye, but also to look like a fool because of someone else's mistake. That's almost worse because it almost feels more preventable in some way. This, a lesson for any industry, though, is going to be to surround yourself with good people, surround yourself with people who are better than you are, and they're gonna help you be better as a result. If you don't have people around you who you can trust, your candidacy is not going to go very far, and you're going to be left with a lot of work stuck on your desk.
I know you've only got a couple minutes, but we would certainly don't want to miss one of your points tonight. And that, of course, is what's going on college campuses. Now, we are also involved with a group called FIRE, which is actually just down the road in Philadelphia. A wonderful group of people who are advocating for campus free speech. They put out a memo reminding colleges today that despite the nature of I believe an assassination of an American citizen by police, that you still have to toe the line in terms of accepted speech. What are your thoughts on that?
I was lucky enough to have an article published on glenbeck.com about ending political bias in college, and this was back in the middle of May. So I'd argue almost an entirely different world at that point than it is now. But one of the things that I really feel strongly about as an adjunct professor is that students who are pursuing their dreams, and whatever those may be, they shouldn't be cut off and curtailed by administrations or professors inserting their own personal opinions into anything, right? That's just not an educator's role. So I gave the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, FIRE, and another organization that protects students' free speech called Speech First. I actually gave them both shout outs in my article because their work is so important. And as this new world starts and people start to go back to campuses on the fall, it's going to be more important than ever that students are aware of the limitations of the law. And they're also very aware when their rights are being violated so they can seek appropriate help. It is unfortunate that college campuses have become an area where speech is limited in many ways. But the hope is that as that pendulum swings back, we'll be able to see a more balanced approach and actually see people exercise that freedom of speech on college campuses across the country.
You're quite active in certain northeastern Pennsylvania colleges and universities. Certainly your presence on that scene. One of the most heinous developments really in the 80s into the 90s was the rise of free speech zones. Now, at surface value, most people would say, it's a free speech zone. That's kind of cool. Well, no, because ultimately free speech is limited to that zone. Do you still see that on college campuses that you're involved in or that you visit?
So as you mentioned at the beginning, I work at Lehigh University and I'm there only as an adjunct. And one of the things that I've been very happy with at Lehigh University is that the free speech issues, at least that I've had exposure to, have been limited. I think that Lehigh has done a better job than many in taking care of those issues, I'll say, or rather accommodating for various points of view. But free speech zones generally are absolutely a problem because, as you mentioned, everywhere else then is not a free speech zone, where the real standard should be the entirety of a campus is a free speech zone. It is a place where students should be exploring and challenging assumptions. It's a very formative time in people's lives. And as I mentioned in the article that I wrote for glenbeck.com, I was actually someone who was told to not pursue what I wanted to pursue by a school administration official when I was an undergrad. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody, especially a college student. Spoiler alert, I'm an outspoken guy. So I was able to speak up for myself and get a happy resolution in the form of an apology letter from the college back in 2013. But I know that for every one student who's like me, who's going to speak up and say something, there's got to be a dozen or 2 dozen students who walk in there, hear something, and they don't get that same resolution, which is a shame. Our students deserve better.
Well, I'll give you a bit of a Lehigh trivia, if you will. In 1979, I believe it was, and I believe the actor's name was John Holmes, who, yes, was a pornographic video star who appeared at Lehigh University. All right. And as I remember, please, you can fact check me on this one. There was quite the controversy at the time, And there was a hearing held, because it's important, in the honor of Dean Wormers everywhere, that we have a hearing. And a hearing was held, and some young wag raised the notion that, well, how could we restrict the free speech of an adult entertainment star if, in fact, the college bookstore sold Penthouse? That young wag was me. And I, as I remember, and certainly my memory is clouded by too many Grateful Dead concerts, but I think the resolution ended up being, instead of encouraging more John Holmes, I think they stopped selling Penthouse at the college bookstore. You're looking at me in astonishment.
Honestly, I just feel very thankful you've given me something to Wikipedia tonight and really dig into the history of Lehigh University a little bit deeper. You may become an example in my business communications class this fall. So
that'll be that won't be the first time I was made an example of at Lehigh University. That's all I'm going to say. Well, again, I know we got off to a little bit of a late start. We fumbled with the technology a little bit. I'm hoping we could do this. We're trying to do in our schedule, folks, if you're just listening to this for the first time, Connor Dragotis is of ConnorDragotis.com. He's well published, again, on websites and in the quote-unquote real media. As well as a communications expert, he works as a communications director for a think tank during the day. He teaches communications at Lehigh University and as an adjunct professor. And generally speaking, has been all around the Liberty biz trying to perform, let's just say, an upgrade, if you will. I'll use that word kindly, but certainly I believe one of the brightest young minds in terms of messaging that the Liberty movement has. We're blessed to have you. I'd love to do this on a monthly basis. Just let's set a night if you can. I know your schedule sometimes will be in conflict, and we can work around that. But I've always enjoyed the kind of repartee that we've just naturally had on going back and forth on these issues. What you're talking about is critically important because I think the takeaway from tonight is you can use professionals to package, if you will, your message without corrupting the message, can't you?
Absolutely. That's what they're there for. And if they're not doing that, fire them and get another one, because there's a lot of companies out there that do this kind of work.
Right. And if we don't package the message, it's simply, as much as we all love to believe that we live in a life filled with gumdrops and fairy tales, is it fair to say simply the message won't be heard?
Absolutely. It falls on deaf ears in the era of digital media. If you're not getting likes and shares, the algorithms are going to bury you and you're going to be obsolete.
There you go. That's why we have him on the show. You really can't put it any more simply. And this, by the way, applies not just to the folks at the very top. This applies to the guy who's running for town council, the young lady who's running for mayor, folks who are running for governor. This, whether we like it or not, this occurs at every level of every product. And politicians are a product, and government is a product that we want to shelve permanently. But at the same time, in order to, let's just say, eliminate the power mongering, sadly, we have to gain some type of traction in that world in order to eliminate it. And if we simply try to run these isolated campaigns of virtue and good thoughts, and simply think that by merely telepathically projecting them out into the world that somehow they'll be heard, the official Coalition Talk Radio response to that is balderdash. And I think you and I are kind of beating around the bush for being polite, but there's no going forward, is there, without a professional approach?
It's absolutely true.
There you go. You got anything on the now again, we'll share some of the links you gave me out so people can see your work out in the world, but anything you want to talk about is coming up, or you got a couple things on the fire that you're working on, or is it
I do.
Tell us.
Yeah, for sure. My work can always be found at ConnorDragotis.com. And keep an eye. I am going to weigh in on some of the government actions here around the killing of George Floyd. Specifically, I'm going to be hopefully in the Daily Caller talking about why the Department of Justice's decision to pursue charges against Antifa are actually going to swing right back around and bite conservatives in the butt. So should be a pretty aggressive article, and should be a lot of fun to read and hopefully talk about in the future.
Well, as soon as you get that out and about, let us know, because I don't need to schedule. That's a conversation we want to have. I want to have with you.
Absolutely.
All right. Connor Dragotis of ConnorDragotis.com. Believe me, he is the only Connor Dragotis out there, so you won't have any problem finding him, even if you can't spell Connor or Dragotis. But most importantly, Connor, I just want to thank you for, over the last year and a half, 2 years that we've gotten to know each other, your constant contributions to political thought and to raising all of our games. It's astonishingly good work, and we are grateful that you're willing to take time out, out here in the hinterlands at the Coalition Talk Radio and share that with us. You raise our game, and for that I am profoundly grateful.
Well, hey, don't sell yourself short. It's amazing work, and I'm so thankful to be here. Thanks, Pat.
All right, buddy. We will see you soon. And so brings to an end a remarkable evening of programming here at the Coalition Talk Radio. I think it's the reason we're here. Anastasia Williams, advocate for minorities, advocate for the oppressed, advocate for the working poor here in Providence, joined us for a far-ranging conversation about, well, we know what's going on here in Rhode Island, and a press conference that took earlier place today. We had a little bit of fun, actually a lot of fun, with the folks at Golf RI who join us every Thursday night at 7:30, unless I make them late. I apologize for that. But it's just great fun to have them on and lighten things up. And then again, Connor Dragotis, who is a repeat offender here at the Coalition and someone who addresses some of the issues that, quite frankly, I find astonishing when it comes to communications. I say this about our reappearing guests. Their brilliance is in that they answer questions that we didn't even know we had to ask. So when you have that sort of epiphany, I've been trying to put that to words. I've been trying to find a way to capture that. When you hear someone like Connor, when you hear someone like, well, name our guests. That's what we're trying to achieve here at the Coalition Talk Radio. So we're going to sign off for this evening. We will be back tomorrow night. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And, of course, the mothership. Our legacy site at coalitionradio.us or at coalitionradionetwork.com. Folks, if you listen to this and you have a moment, please like our page on the Facebook. Please follow us on the Twitter. It's critical to us. Independent media relies on, if you will, social media to advance our programming, advance our conversations, advance our word, and advance our intents above the sort of white noise, the babbling masses of the mainstream media. Then have a wonderful night, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night.